Hey everyone, and welcome back. This is the Happy Cat here, and it is a hot and sunny day where I am. But I just thought I'd do another one of these thoughts on videos. So, just as a disclaimer again, this isn't a review or analysis of the content being talked about. It's just whatever happened to stick with me after finishing a book, movie, game, whatever. Right now it's just books. Because sometimes the things that I latch onto that I get out of a book or what have you are not necessarily the main theme of the book. Sometimes it's just like one chapter that I get really stuck on. Because, for example, lately I've been thinking a lot about success, like what it takes to reach the next level, accomplish your goals, be successful, or feel meaningful, these kinds of themes. And so that's why these books, Hillbilly Elegy and The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, I'm doing them both in one video because I think they're actually interesting parallels of each other when it comes to, like, what should you do to be successful, or two different views of people on paths to success. At least that's kind of what I latched onto. But then I also have some thoughts on, I'll just call it the subtle art, because there are some things I had with it. If I know I said this wasn't a review, if I had to give them a review just right off the bat, I'd say Hillbilly Elegy, like 3 stars. It's pretty good. You should read it if it sounds interesting, but I wouldn't run out to go read it. I don't know why it's on all these bestseller lists. It's kind of like that. And then The Subtle Art, maybe like 2.5 stars. I have a lot of problems with it personally, but I also don't think it's bad for people to read. I just had a lot of personal things after kind of looking into some stuff with it. I also listened back to the last video on 1984, and I'm so mad because I did go on a lot of tangents, and there was a lot of stuff that I missed that I really wanted to talk about because there were so many, honestly, like, amazing scenes that are stuck in my brain, but well, we can return to it later. So this time I have some guiding bullet points, so hopefully I can stay on track and not, all out ramble so much. But yeah, let's just start. Okay, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. So the first half I thought was pretty good, pretty decent, had some solid interesting stuff in there. The only thing that I found odd, though, so I went into this book not knowing anything about the author, the book, or anything. I just wanted to go in, clean, and then look up all that stuff, all the discussions and articles later. And I thought it was interesting because he was using all of these little historical anecdotes, like all these little stories to give examples for the life advice he was providing, right? And a lot of them were really good. I really liked the opener about the writer who just said, "Don't try." And the whole idea was that if you're not trying at something, if you're not trying to be great, at least this is how I interpreted it, it kind of relieves this pressure for you to just keep doing things, and eventually you could be great. At least that's kind of what I get from it when I hear the words "don't try." And then, other stuff about, I've heard this one a lot, was it Picasso or Van Gogh? I'm so sorry. Famous artist draws something on a napkin, and then a lady says, "Oh, could I have that drawing?" And he's like, "That'll be $2,000. And she's like, "What? That took you 2 seconds." And he's like, "Yeah, but it took me 20 years to be able to draw it that quickly." And so the lesson there is that, it takes years and years to be able to do something masterfully. So that's the value, right? So all these different kind of historical examples or fables of other people, I'm thinking, okay, who is this guy giving advice, and why doesn't he talk about his life so much? And so the second half of the book is where he more starts to get into himself. So the first half, it weirdly ended with something saying like, and now the next 4 chapters will be my, like, top life lessons that I want to share with you. By the way, I'm butchering all this. All this is from memory. I did not, like, write down quotes, and it's from last week. So it's just kind of what I remember. You're saying the next 4 chapters are, like, my life lessons for you. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. I thought we were just, it almost felt like he wrote the first half of the book and then wrote 4 separate kind of blog posts, and you'll see why I say blog posts, and then wrapped up the book from there. But then he started talking about his life, right? And he said that as soon as he got out of college, he started a blog, like relationship advice blog. And I was like, huh, is this some social media person? So that's where I went into this book not knowing anything about it or who he was. And so then I look him up, and it's hilarious because I just Google his name. Sorry. And I see, of course, the book come up. And then I see posts on r/the red pill and some pickup artist blogs and stuff like that. And I guess my understanding is that his first book was about relationship advice or like kind of pickup techniques, but it was about being honest, and it was sort of this contrarian style to the typical scummy pickup artist things. And that's where I can see how this book, it felt like he said, okay, relationship advice is too small of an audience. Let's just broaden it to life advice. And that's where now I could see him when he said, oh yeah, I partied too much and I was too interested in girls when I was younger. I just thought that that was just some tidbit about this random author's life. But now I see he was in this book, in The Subtle Art, he's kind of downplaying the pickup artisty thing to sort of appeal to this wider audience like me, who just sees it on a bestseller shelf and is like, oh, let's pick this up. But now that I did some research, I realized that this is almost like a contrarian book for life advice. Like, you know, he says all the time, self-help books are too focused on, you know, be positive, be happy, and then everything will be okay. And instead, you should kind of focus on your negativity. Like, what are you willing to suffer for? That it's okay to feel negative emotion. It's okay to not be happy all the time and to like suffer through things for something greater. And you know, I think that's fair. And I think that that's why I liked that first half, because that was more of what it focused on. At least that's what I got out of it. But the thing is that I would say the way he words it definitely makes you go like, yeah, you know, most self-help books, those aren't helpful at all. But it's still, he is writing a self-help book that's just being kind of the edgy contrarian. That was the other thing. Okay, this is a really random, stupid detail that I found hilarious. So in the first half, though, the two kind of gimmicks is first he uses the word fuck all the time. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, I get it. You're selling the brand of the title of your book. And then he has this character called the Disappointment Panda, who I did find like kind of quirky, I guess. It was a fun metaphor. But he kind of worded it like, yeah, I made this Disappointment Panda character to describe this deep metaphor. I don't give a fuck. And it almost felt like I'm gonna reclaim lolcat's I'm so random humor, but make it this like badass lifestyle. I don't know if anyone gets what I mean by that, but I just found that funny. But yeah, I would say I really like the examples he used of other people. I thought they were actually really nice little illustrations. I could almost imagine using them in my head, like when I feel down, as like, oh yeah, but remember that guy? How he said, don't try, just keep going, you know? But when he started going into his life was when it was super hard to relate. And even without the pickup artisty stuff, I'm not even going to get into that. I'm not like offended that he was that in that type of area. I just mean looking at him as a person, right? Just very fairly. Like one of his main conflicts was like, yeah, so I thought that traveling, you know, would make me happy, experiencing the world and, you know, dating a bunch of girls. And, you know, when I went to I was at my 53rd country, 54th country, 55th country, and I realized I didn't feel satisfied. And it's one of those things, like there's this, I think it's a Buddhist quote, where it's like some people have suffered too much, others have suffered too little. And I think that's very real. Like some people have lived a life of excess, so they've never experienced the conflict that makes happiness feel so good. Like you don't appreciate your current lifestyle until you've experienced something so much worse to make you appreciate it. And it seems like he ran into the conflict of suffering too little. Like, oh my gosh, I've had so much excess that that nothing means anything, I guess. And it's like I think it is a valid conflict. It's just hard to relate to when, you know, I would say much of the world is dealing with maybe the other end of not having enough at all to even remotely experience that kind of lifestyle. But once again, I'm you can't blame someone for having the means to travel. I just mean it was hard for me personally to relate. 'Cause also, like, so at the end, I actually do appreciate that at the end he addresses death, and I'll get into that in a sec, because that's something I kind of think about a lot in a non-morbid way. But he kind of closes it, and this is where I know nothing about his life, but when he was a teenager, one of his friends died at a party, like drunkenly, right? And he kind of closed that as kind of this big dramatic finale about death. And I don't know everything that's happened in his life, but it was just kind of like, it felt like, okay, is that the most you've suffered? Because he talks about suffering and pain and all this stuff, but he doesn't really talk about his own suffering and pain. And that's where I was kind of waiting for that. Like, when is he going to get more personal? Because there has to be more than just, I traveled too much. Like, no one has that as their only problem in their life. Because I think either he really, truly just hasn't had that many horrible things happen to him, which, you know, good. I would never wish anything bad to happen. Or it just, he didn't want to go too deep. Do you know what I mean? That's just a hunch I get. I don't know. And that's where I wish he would have gone deeper into himself. But instead he just kind of, I think it all just kind of was on the surface. The last thing that was kind of bizarre was in the chapter on relationships, he says to his wife, he says that if his wife's hair or shoes, if she's trying something different with her look and they're about to go out but it honestly looks bad, he's just gonna straight up tell her, because he don't give a fuck, right? And I get what they're saying, and I know that between my boyfriend and I, we have never once cared about each other's looks. I've never once made a comment about our appearance before we go out, because that's not the point. But I can get that not everyone lives like I do, and that some people do care about how they look before they go out, and that sometimes things just do look bad, right? But the reason why I found it bizarre is because he's using that as an example, as like, you know, I'm brutally honest to her and she's brutally honest to me, and sometimes we bruise each other's egos, but it's for the best because we're just like saying what's actually on our minds. And I think that's great, but that's such a weird example because, like, once again, don't you have anything deeper than how you guys look before going out? Like, I would say, I don't know, an example for me might be, hey Anne, I think you're getting obsessed with thinking about going to grad school because you just want to avoid, your goals are getting harder now, so you want to do something to kind of avoid those while feeling productive. You know what I mean? I would say that's a pretty good analysis. I'm looking to things like grad school, or what projects I can do, or jumping on new things because it's getting hard to finish the ones that I'm currently doing. I would say that's something that's brutally honest that I don't always like to hear, but it sets me straight, right? Otherwise, I don't want to just like hate on it. I would say things I really appreciated from the first half. So once again, I really like the idea of not just being completely positive and believing everything will be okay because you're so special. I appreciate that, like, you want to, like, your dreams are the things that you want to suffer for, that it would be worthwhile for. And that, you know, we want to create things because we want this idea of immortality after death. And I think that's super true, that we live on through our creations, and, you know, that might be something worth suffering for. And I also like the bit on being ordinary. Like, you could write a novel, you could just go for it, get it published, and have it, you know, sell okay, but have no one really know about it at all. And you just need to accept that that's very likely. You know, same with game development, same with anything else. And I think that's good perspective to have. I think, though, it's also important to sort of have these simultaneously, what would you call it? Simultaneously opposite views. Like, accept that you're completely ordinary, there's nothing special about you, the world owes you absolutely nothing, and that you'll probably never be something, you know, amazing and immortal. But at the same time, believe that, like, holy crap, you can do so much. Like, you can do so much with your time. You can do so much. You can be extraordinary. it's kind of a cycle of like motivation and then grounding yourself and never losing sight of either of those. I don't know. So, and then lastly, I appreciate the death chapter. I've been thinking about that topic a lot lately, I guess. Just thinking about, okay, if the best case scenario is that when you die, everything's just black, right? Maybe that's best case or worst case, depending on like what you think. Maybe it's just the neutral case. That when you die, it's just like when you go under anesthesia or you fall asleep, like you have no awareness, there are no dreams, it's just, you're just not there anymore. Or it's like, I like thinking about it as, you're not sad or scared about the time before you were born, you just weren't there, right? And so neutral case scenario, most likely scenario, when you die, it's just like before you were born. And so I think, okay, thinking about that, like, what kind of life should I lead? And I'm not going to answer all that right here, but I think it's important to think about because, there really are no do-overs, and I feel like a lot of people live like they're going to somehow just get a second chance at the end of their life, when you're not, and every minute counts. That's why I'm becoming a lot more aware of like, okay, I'm gonna play video games when I actually need a break and need to chill out, but I don't want to waste like my good energetic time just kind of zoning out, right? Once again, I don't think video games are bad things. I'm just being very aware of when I'm getting sucked in rather than choosing to play them because I'm actually having a fun time. So I'll just leave it at that because I could talk about that topic for a while and go to some heavy places, but I'll just say I appreciate mentioning death because I feel like a lot of books just focus on the right now and not, we're all gonna die pretty soon in the context of the universe. So moving on from there, great transition, Hillbilly Elegy. All right, let's completely shift gears. So this book, a lot of people have been reading it as a way, or they've been pitching it as like, hey, help you understand how Trump won the election. And I am not going to go into politics here, just like in the last video. I'm not going to go into any of the political stuff, but I'll just say I viewed it more as just one guy describing his life kind of year by year, and then at the end spending about one chapter concluding like what he thinks about his own story and what he thinks that might mean for the rest of his sort of hillbilly community. Basically, he grew up in this hillbilly culture where people were very poor, unemployed, uneducated, and there was even a paper that had come out, looking at different groups and found that working class whites, especially in those areas, were incredibly pessimistic. Like, they did not believe their children would have better opportunities than they did. Whereas other minority groups like, Black people, Hispanic people, were more positive than the working class white people. So it's just this interesting subculture that honestly I hadn't learned too much about. That's why I wanted to read this book. I'm actually interested to read more into the history and stuff since he didn't go as broadly into that. And he grows up in this culture and he moves away from Kentucky to a town in Ohio, but they're still pretty poor, and he lives with his mom and his grandma who have their own kind of hillbilly craziness, but it definitely seems like his mom was kind of like definitely an addict, kind of narcissistic, always having different boyfriends and father figures, and none of them were like mean or abusive, but it was just this constant shift of people and constantly moving around. But his grandma was the only one who was like, you're gonna do well in school, and she was the only one who was really insistent on him, doing things to learn responsibility, like get a job, study hard, all that. And then he moves on and he joins the military. I forget if it was the Army or the Marines or the Air Force, I don't know. He joins the military, and then the leaders in his military kind of helped guide him because there were a lot of things he didn't know how to do, and they ended up kind of being those figures for him. And then he goes to college and eventually gets into Yale. And then the craziest thing about this part of getting into Yale Law School is that the person who encouraged him to write this book was Amy Chua, which the reason why I find that hilarious is because I had to do like in my high school, we had to do like a thesis paper, and mine was actually on, I guess this shows how much I think about this, different cultural definitions of success. And I read Amy Chua's book called like The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother. I don't know if you guys remember a New York Times article maybe 5 or 6 years ago about this tiger mom who was totally crazy. Like, her daughters weren't allowed to have sleepovers, and they'd fly. They literally, her daughters, I didn't know this, they would fly from, where's Yale? Is Yale in Connecticut? I'm sorry, I forget. They would fly from the East Coast, where Yale was, because she is a law professor at Yale, and they would fly to the music school that was, no joke, like 2 blocks away from where I lived in Chicago. I had no idea, because when they said the teachers' names, I knew that they taught at my music school, and they said the Music Institute of Chicago, and it blew my mind. It was 2 blocks away from where I lived, and so it was that was also a bizarre moment, because I'm thinking, okay, is there just some secret group of like elite people who go to like Ivy League schools or who are entrepreneurs? I don't know, just this elite group of people who just get books sold, like they know this kind of formula. Or she said, you know, like, I don't know, I'm really paranoid, and I always imagine like not insane conspiracy theories, but conspiracy theories that don't really matter. Like, did they time the release of this book? Was she like, oh, you know, with the election and stuff, you should release it in this year? Or I don't know. It just was so bizarre, that because I'm pretty sure her book about being a tiger mom was kind of a publicity stunt, because there were certain things she said that were just like stupid, that I just did not think were true. Like, she thought the Greek or like kind of American zodiac, you know, like Pisces and Libra and that kind of zodiac, she said that's dumb, but the Chinese zodiac can really predict and give you insight onto like what people are like, you know, like the year of the dog, year of the cat, wherever you were born in. Is there a year of the cat? I honestly don't know. I know that I was born in the year of the dog. But, you know, she was saying stuff like that, where it was like, clearly the Chinese zodiac is better because everything from China is better. Like, I hired a maid to speak Chinese around the house because she spoke the Hokkien dialect and not Mandarin. So she hired a maid so her kids would learn Mandarin, because basically the book painted her this picture as wanting to be the most Chinese mom possible, even though that wasn't actually who she was. It was very bizarre. That's why I think it was kind of a publicity stunt, because all of that has died down since then, and I don't know. So that's why I got really paranoid about this book. Like, is this just another one of those? But it seemed genuine enough. I just thought that was hilarious. In any case, big tangent. He goes to Yale Law School, and then, you know, there's a lot of like culture clashes and things he had to work through. You know, bad habits that he had learned from his like mom and from his life that he had to kind of undo. And in the end, though, he says like the number one thing wasn't like some kind of like financial assistance or anything like that helped him, but it was having a lot of like a support system, having role models and people to guide him along the way. So like his grandma telling him to, you know, stick to school. And then his sister helped him out when he was a lot younger in a lot of their like really bad family situations. And, you know, he had the leaders in his military that helped him just figure out life. And, you know, even Amy Chua to lead him to this book and lead him into the right path for what he wanted to do for law. I guess to conclude this, like for myself to have some closure, I guess Hillbilly Elegy, what I get from it is that when you're really suffering and, you know, the world seems kind of against you, you kind of need a support system to point you to where the light at the end of the tunnel is, to show you like what a better life could look like or a better situation. But in the end, they can just point in the direction, but you have to like crawl all the way there by yourself. And that's what I kind of get. Like when you're really in a stage of suffering where you just want to have a normal, good life, that's kind of what you have to do. And then on the other hand, if you're, kind of suffering too little, where you're just focusing on being happy, or you're not really pursuing your goals, or you're making a lot of excuses, then you kind of need to ground yourself. That's the biggest thing I took out of Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. You kind of just need to, I guess in his kind of gimmicky words, stop giving fucks about things that don't matter and all the things that are weighing you down and, your excuses, and ground in reality to just say, you know what? I may never be truly like famous. My novel might never make it. My game might never make it. But I really enjoy this process, or I know there's this small community that would love this type of thing, and that's who I'm making it for. Or I just want to be a better craftsman. You got to choose your own metric for success and ground yourself, and just do it. So that's where I feel like they're kind of going from two opposite ends of the spectrum, and then, figuring out how to just be like good and happy in the middle. In any case, maybe that's also me just projecting a lot of my own opinions and ideas, but otherwise, yeah, let me know what you think, and have a happy day wherever you are. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.